analytically and critically. Today, our podcast is with Anna Maria Mydlarska from Gdansk Solidarność Center, who is the manager of documentary film section. And she is one of the leading Polish intellectuals and Solidarność legacy expert. Welcome to our program.
Documentary film director.
And documentary film director.
Yes.
So, dear Anna, very nice to meet you. And Professor Gintautas Mažeikis with us, and I'm sure he has plenty of questions.
So thank you, Anna, for the participating in our podcast. And my first question after a long period of the beginning of Solidarność in the early 80s, that ordinary we consider Solidarność as some kind, very united movement. But now when we are reading and we are doing interview with some activists in Poland, we hear different voices. I would say that in Lithuania, when we are talking about Sąjūdis, we as well, after a long time, we listen not the one story, but few stories of them. And today, in the preparation to our meeting, I found even some interview about female role in Solidarność in the beginning of Solidarność of 80s, and quite hot discussion between followers of Lech Walesa, which we in Lithuania very appreciate, and we accept with a big proud to meet him every time. And you as well collaborated with him, as I know, for a long time. And then the other followers of Anna Valentinovich and Alina Pienkovska, I understand that at the beginning probably they were united, but now it's some kind of discussion. Could you explain us in Lithuania what kind of discussion there is and what does mean it?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that Solidarity was at the same time a trade union and a social movement, a very powerful social movement. And the changes introduced by Solidarity are seen by some of the people as the revolution and by others as the last national uprising. And in our exhibition at the European Solidarity Center, we have both views presented by two different historians, by Norman Davies, who is talking about national uprising, and by Mr. Andrzej Paczkowski, who is talking about a revolution. And also Andrzej Friszke sees it as a revolution. And the thing is, you have the biggest social movement in the history of mankind. 10 million people who joined in, signed in, and there were many other supporters that couldn't possibly join in because it was a trade union open only to those that were employed, officially employed. So students, farm workers, people employed in the agriculture, but also artisans or artists. They couldn't join in, they could only support. So in a movement like that, the unity was very much visible in the first years. And the unity was the unity of the common goal. And the goal, officially stated, was more free, more democratic society, and unofficially thought about independent country, independent from Soviet influence. It was not officially spoken at the time of official existence of Solidarity, but it was obviously there. And so those were people from left to right, obviously not having similar opinions on virtually anything, yes, but they were able to work together. They were able to understand each other, and they were trying to do their best for the benefit of the country, for the benefit of the movement. Yes. Well, the differences around the leadership of Lech Wałęsa here in Gdańsk were stemming from the fact that before 1980, he was just one of a tiny group of so-called free trade unions of Pomerania. And it's a tiny group with people you mentioned, Anna Walentynowicz, Alina Pieńkowska, Bogdan Borusewicz, the husband and wife of Andrzej Gwiazda and his wife Joanna. They were all in that tiny group, and there was no practical leader in that group. And Wałęsa was a worker, not an intellectual. Yet during the strike of 1980, he became clearly a leader. Actually, Anna Walentynowicz has been hoping all along that the leader should be Andrzej Gwiazda, who was an engineer. And as a young journalist in 1980, in 1981, as a journalist for the Solidarity Press, Solidarity Bulletin, I had the privilege of having interview with all the leaders of Solidarity at the time. And I remember my interview with Gwiazda and with Walentynowicz, and I was asking them, being a young, believing to be very bright, like we all believe when we are very young, is it why do you think you can question the leadership of Wałęsa? You are an intellectual and you can't be the leader of that movement, because the most difficult thing for the communist is that we have a real worker, also a worker with 6 children, at the top of that movement. It makes it virtually for them to attack him as a leader. The communists couldn't, really attack him. And the intellectual, an oppositionist, it would be as easy target for attack. And that's why Bogdan Borusewicz, who helped to organize the strike, he didn't show up at all. He was hiding. He was absent from the photos because he knew that being part of the Workers' Defense Committee in the 70s, he would be denounced by communists just by saying, you see who is he? He's a dissident. You can't. He is misleading the workers. Yes, so their leadership was out of question. The problem is neither Andrzej Gwiazda nor his wife, and the least of all Mrs. Anna Walentynowicz, understood that. And from my perspective at that time, it was just being, well, not very wise on their part not to understand it. And it's now, of course, Gwiazda was part of Solidarity leadership all the time. Also during the, the years that followed. He had some small but faithful group of followers, yes, including, first of all, Anna Walentynowicz, but they were not mainstream of Solidarity movement, never. And it was particularly visible during the elections. During the first Solidarity Congress in 1981, where Wałęsa has won in the first run by overwhelming majority, and Gwiazda has got, I don't remember, 6 or 7% of votes, which is, not comparable, yes? The problem is now that some people, some historians are trying to rewrite that history. And from that perspective, it's quite important that we had that meeting of the leaders of the temporary National Committee just a few days ago, both in Warsaw and here, where the leadership of Lech Wałęsa has never been questioned. And among those talking about it was, and this is the crucial fact, Bogdan Borusewicz himself, yes, who had many problems with Wałęsa's leadership later on also, but he always acknowledged that the leader, and a charismatic leader, we have to add, was and is Lech Wałęsa. And it cannot be really changed. Cannot be really changed. You can't rewrite history, and you can't change the place of Lech Wałęsa, who did incredible things in the course of history. And first of all, he managed to run 10 million people union without same political option, and managed to keep it together all the time from 1980, during the time of his imprisonment, when he, although he was offered anything he wanted by the communists, he was all alone without any advisors, and he just flatly refused to accept any of their proposals. And that was crucial. And later, when he became Nobel Peace Prize laureate, his speech in Sweden was wonderful. And then it was delivered by his wife, because he was afraid that if he goes out of the country, he wouldn't be able to go back. And his figure, his ideas were crucial to the solidarity during these very difficult years following the martial law. And when everybody believed that somehow solidarity would be non-existing anymore, it turned out that as soon as Pope came to Poland in 1983, again people were reminding about solidarity. Then Pope's visit to Gdańsk in 1987, and the presence of Lech Wałęsa together with the Pope, both in 1983 and in 1987, it was a visible sign that solidarity still exists. And later we have to remember that after round-table talks led by Lech Wałęsa and the committee he established of 100 people with leading intellectuals like Leszek Kołakowski, the leader theoretician on communism from Oxford, yes? So this committee prepared Polish transition and Polish elections on June 4th, 1989. And in those elections, people of Solidarity team were winning by making photos with Wałęsa, and that photo was their ticket to be elected. And people trusted to such an extent that even if they had no idea who those people were, who were their candidates, when they see a photo of a man with, or a woman with Lech Wałęsa and Solidarity logo above, those were the people that were to represent us. And the idea came from our leader feature film director, Andrzej Wajda, and it was a wonderful idea because it prevented all falsifying of the elections, but it was showing that popular trust in Lech Wałęsa, confirmed later in his election in a popular vote for the president, the first president of the independent Poland. So his place in history cannot really be changed. And of course, after achieving major success in his presidency, I mean the withdrawal of Soviet troops from Polish territory, that was a crucial matter. And we are seeing, by looking at Ukraine, what could have happened if he didn't manage to achieve it. And it wasn't, if people say that it was obvious, it wasn't obvious, and you know, it's never easy. So he achieved that. And of course, the transition was painful, like in all the other countries. And in all the other countries of the region, post-communists were elected back to power as prime ministers. In Poland, actually, for the shortest period, because only for one term. And again, post-Solidarity parties. And it was again Lech Wałęsa who was pushing for the pluralism, for having a real political parties representing right, left, and whoever, yes? And in the beginning, we have many parties. Now we are like in many other democratic countries, we have the ruling party and the main opposition party. And both of those parties are dominated by people with solidarity background. And it's very difficult, and this is an interesting point, it's very difficult to say what makes some of them being in that party or the other. It's very difficult really to describe it. Of course, generally we suggest that Law and Justice Party is a little bit more to the right, but at the same time they have far more left-oriented social policy. And we can say that former Civic Platform and now Civic Coalition is more to the left and is more liberal, we would say, than rather right in their economic policies, yes? But it's not the whole truth. And the fact is that many people in Poland still consider themselves the orphans of poppies, which was supposed the coalition of those two parties. And if those two parties were working together, they would, if they were at the European Parliament in the leading group in which Civic Committee is right now, and not in that one conservative where Law and Justice is right now. So if they were together in one group, they would have a leading voice in that group. They would have the enormous number of MPs and the European MPs, and they would be very important. And from many people's perspective, it would have been much better if they were together. But unfortunately, they have divided. And I personally, but these are my personal views, I actually believe it's just a power struggle and also personality conflicts in it that made those parties so separate, as bitterly quarreling as they are. But these bitter quarrels are now typical for political discussion, unfortunately, in almost all European countries. And in Poland, that quarrel, we might say, is a quarrel within a family. And as you know, family quarrels sometimes are as bitter as you can see. It's worth reminding that actually both late Lech Kaczyński and Jarosław Kaczyński in the years 1988, 1991, I believe, were among the most close Lech Wałęsa collaborators, architects of the roundtable talks, builders of the change in the coalition by which two parties, post-communist parties that were not really communist, but they were, one was peasant party, the other one was artisans party. And those two parties were switched from the communist political group to Solidarity, persuaded to join Solidarity. And that was a shift of power in the first Polish parliament after the changes. And the architects of that were Kaczyński's brothers. And that was they were realizing the idea of Lech Wałęsa, of snatching powers from political power from communists in that way. So they were on that side. And now their political party is attacking Roundtable, which is, it's not really logical. And the leading opponent of the Roundtable talks at the time of Roundtable talks was Bronisław Komorowski, who was later the president of Poland on behalf of the Civic Platform. They were switching sides, yes, and it's complicated.
Yeah, you're so skilled and experienced in this all changes and development of political parties and groups in Poland. Could you compare and comment, because you mentioned that in these days Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, one of the leader of Belarus movement, will come to you, to Poland. Probably you will met her, and could you comment that you know that now there are a lot of Belarusian opposition critique her, you know, and even we see some kind of split, as always, split between Belarusian opposition, you know. And this leadership, you skilled in the understanding of political leadership. You commented just now about Lech Walesa story and his, you know, collaboration and friendship and Solidarność movement. How could you comment this situation with Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya and the crisis maybe of her leadership now?
Well, from Polish perspective, it's very difficult to judge, especially in a country like Belarus, where you don't really hear easily the voices from the opposition. Their voice is somehow not coming out clearly to us. But having said that, probably in Gdańsk we have the largest group of the Belarusians in exile. They just had, I'm just coming to you straight from the meeting of that group with her. And they were showing unity. They were showing that they are behind her. There was nothing that would suggest that there is any question about it. And also on the Polish part, she's here today. She has already met with Lech Wałęsa in a private meeting. They were just on their own with her advisors and him only. There are photos already on Facebook of that meeting, so it's already over. And she's having a press conference right now, so I'm with you, so I'm not in that press conference at the European Solidarity Center. Probably you can she's with our city mayor, Aleksandra Dulkiewicz, so they are talking together with journalists. But today or tomorrow, she's also scheduled to meet with our president, Andrzej Duda. So she will see the leading figures and I'm sure she will also see the leaders of the opposition in Poland. So she is regarded as the head of state, and she has meetings on really top level, yes, and she is being treated as the president of the country, like it was the case in the past when Lech Wałęsa was visiting foreign capitals as the leader of Solidarity movement. She was given the treatment of the head of state everywhere where he went. To Italy, to Great Britain, to France, to Germany, he was everywhere greeted with all the ceremonies granted to the heads of state. So,
if I may, I would like to mention briefly Adam Michnik. A year ago or 2 years ago on Polish TV, for the occasion, I think, of Polish independence, there was shown video excerpt from 1889, Adam Michnik with a cigarette, hugging and kissing Jaruzelski, forgiving for everything. And that video was explained by the critics as a compromise of the current.
It wasn't of 1989. No. The dates are crucial here. Adam Michnik has actually, in 1989, at the time of roundtable talks, the roundtable talks were postponed for half a year because the government flatly refused, the government of Wojciech Jaruzelski flatly refused any talks if Adam Michnik, Jacek Kuroń, and I forgot 2 other names, were part of the Solidarity delegation. And it was only because everybody wanted to really to agree to that. The only person that said absolutely no was Lech Wałęsa, of whom the two were critics, but he said no, the communists would not appoint our delegation to roundtable talks. We will talk together with Adam Michnik and Jacek Kuron, or we wouldn't talk at all. And in 1989, Adam Michnik have seen Jaruzelski in person for the first time, and vice versa. Yes, Jaruzelski have seen Adam Michnik for the first time. During the roundtable talks, they have come to see that they are not as crazy terrorists as the communists wanted to see them. And later on, when Jaruzelski was totally out of any power whatsoever, when he was just an old man, actually sometimes harassed by the extremist group, not really harassed, but let's say every 13th of December, anniversary of the martial law, there was a huge demonstration around his house. Yes, lots of noise and cries about how dreadful thing he had done in the past. At that time, Adam Michnik really befriended in a way General Jaruzelski. Yes, it's not the same. It's not the same. Yes, it's.
But is he over forgiving?
He was forgiving on his behalf. Yes, he was forgiving on his behalf for the longest terms spent in prison. No one else has spent as long time in prison in Poland during the communist period than Adam Michnik, for his harassment, for his life that was really made very difficult by the functionaries of the communist system. It was his choice, yes, and he, of course, is a person of the left, Adam Michnik, and he actually wasn't as critical of all the things related to communism as some people from the right wing. But those critics of that forgiveness have not suffered as much as he has suffered, yes? So I wouldn't particularly endorse all that, but you have also to remember that Lech Wałęsa had visited Jaruzelski in the hospital when he was dying. And again, he paid his respect to the person that enabled the transition of power in a peaceful way in Poland, yes? They were not personal friends. They were not hugging. They were with Lech Wałęsa. They were not on first name terms. Adam Michnik actually went to be on first name terms with Kiszczak, the general that really introduced martial law, and not general under Jaruzelski, but also a general and responsible directly for the secret services at the time. So, Adam Michnik has gone very far. Lech Wałęsa has not gone as far as all that, but towards the end of Jaruzelski's life, he visited him in the hospital. Wałęsa explained it by his Christian beliefs, yes? That's how he explained that. But it was also a respect for a partner in talks. Finally, the communists were partners to the arrangement that led to the freedom of Poland and freedom of elections. That's the crucial part. We still have a system in which it's the popular voting that decides on who is to be in power, who is to represent us. Of course, we can be unhappy about the results. I was really terribly unhappy about the results of the election in 1993 when they have elected a post-communist government. I was terribly unhappy about the results of the presidential elections when Wałęsa, after one 6-year term, was replaced by the post-communist Kwaśniewski. And we have to be honest and tell you that in Gdańsk, as well as in the Gdańsk region, the communists have never ever, or post-communists have never ever won the election. It was in other parts of Poland, not in our region. It was never, so we were really bitterly disappointed, yes, but we have to accept it. You know, democracy is based on the popular vote.
Yes, Anna, this is very interesting what you mentioned about that communist failure in Gdansk. And this is interesting because you know that communists always presented themselves as a defenders of labor power, you know, and labor interests. And there was strikes and even revolution against them. And even today, communists and far left wing movements would like to present themselves as well as representatives of labor power and to find some sympathies with independent trade unions. How could you explain this failure of leftists and communists in Gdansk between shipyard workers? You know, what's happened? Why workers didn't accept their promises?
In 1970, there was a major strike of not only the shipyard workers, but generally a huge strike in Poland. And the workers, among them Lech Wałęsa, who was then part of the striking committee in Gdańsk shipyard, but not the only leader of that committee. They went to the streets of Gdańsk, and the riots and the burning of the Communist Party committee building, they resulted in, they were crushed, and there were over 49 people who were killed and hundreds of thousands were wounded, yes, in those riots. And the riots were in the coastal cities of Gdańsk, Gdynia, and Szczecin, and victims were everywhere. And I think we as a society here in Gdańsk, we have never forgotten that. So from then on, even the relatively mild regime of Gierek, the first chairman of the Communist Party, who was pretty well liked, and about whom just recently they've produced an almost hagiographic film, feature film in Poland. And he's particularly popular in Silesia, where he, before becoming the leader of Poland, he was also the regional leader in Silesia. And even that mild regime that was installed after the dramatic massacre of December 1970 couldn't change the fact that the workers of Gdańsk region, but also of Szczecin region, would never ever again trusted the regime that was actually using militia and army and tanks and all possible power against workers, shooting straight at them. Yes, so that's, I think, is the most popular explanation. The events of 1970 have created also another, probably interesting from your point of view, change. You have to remember that Gdańsk, that was destroyed almost like Warsaw, so almost 80% destroyed during the World War II by Soviet troops attacking the city. In fact, looking at it as if it was a German city, which was wrong, but you know, that's how they treated it at that time.
Yeah, we
And
should remember that for our audience, that pre-war it was the independent city dancing, they call it.
no, but in Poland it was called Gdańsk, and it was Wolne Miasto Gdańsk. So that was the problem was that the treaty after World War I did not decided to give Gdańsk simply to Poland, but ordered it to become free city where both all inhabitants, without regard to their nationality, have their say. But it wasn't the case all the way through, because the Nazi Germany had influenced free city of Gdańsk, and in fact, at that time, the local authorities became Nazi authorities. So, and Polish population of Gdańsk was put in large extent, first was exterminated immediately after the beginning of the war, and then a lot of them were put in a concentration camp next to Gdańsk, which is not very well known, but was the longest existing concentration camp and one of the most cruel ones, yes, Stutthof. And but after the war, people from Lithuania, Polish people from Lithuania came to Gdańsk, from Vilna especially,
From Vilna,
and
yeah.
also partially from Lviv, although most of them went to Wrocław, but some of them came also to Gdańsk, especially intellectuals, professors of the Technical University and future Gdańsk University and Medical University. Those were professors, students from the universities of Vilnius and of Lviv. Poles, mostly, but with some exceptions, some of them being half Ukrainians, some of them being half Lithuanians, but they came to Gdańsk. And so that society was a very mixed society, with people who were of Kashubian origin, meaning people who stayed in that place for thousands of years, Poles who spent 5, 6 generations in that area, and those that arrived before the World War II, and those that arrived after the World War II, like Lech Wałęsa, who came from central Poland. But they, after December 1970, after that massacre, they became one unified society. And they have seen themselves as such ever since. And what really was the crucial thing for the victory, and that's exactly what Alina Pinkowska said, is that the worker was listening to the intellectual. The intellectual was listening to the worker. And that was the key to Solidarity success. It was not just the workers' movement, it was not just the intellectuals' movement. And they were working all together, however, their ideological differences. That was the strength and weakness of Solidarity.
This is a very interesting question of genealogy of Solidarność from this mixed group, what you mentioned. How do you think, was it possible if it will be in pure Polish roots city, not such a collection, you know, of I would say victims of Second World War and pre-war period from Vilna, Lviv, so from central Poland, you know, experience all this Nazi regime in Gdansk, you know, all these histories with Stuttgart, what you mentioned. This is very, very traumatic history, and people came with very traumatic genealogy, and then they resisted, you know. Why it's not happened in the other cities?
Well, I think that in Gdańsk, actually, those people did not regard themselves as victims. They considered themselves to be lucky and proud to rebuild that city themselves. Yes, the professors of Art Academy, whom I also didn't mention, they designed the reconstruction of the Gdańsk old town and beautiful monuments of the past, and of the Polish past of Gdańsk, especially. Yes, they did it with love and devotion, and they felt in the process that they are part of the new beginning, of something new. And after 1970, they suffered together, and that brought them together in that unity. But they were oriented for the future rather than for the past. And that orientation to the future was very important, and the optimism of those times. Solidarity is the time when the society was pretty young, so there was a large portion of the society, over half of the people were below 25. Below 25 throughout Poland. Me born in Gdańsk. I was born in Gdańsk. I'm the good example because my father's comes from Pomeranian family. My grandfather was killed by Nazi Germany in that crime against Polish intelligentsia that took lives of hundreds of thousands of Polish teachers, priests, whoever had higher education in the area in Pomerania was exterminated. Yes, so my grandfather was part of that. He was a professor of Latin and Greek. Yes, and therefore it was he was considered to be the enemy of the German Nazi state. And my mother came from Vilna together with the University of so we had that mixed background, and we were very young, and we were sure that we are going to succeed. And solidarity is a story about optimistic outlook to the future, not to the past crimes. And generally, we were also very much in the spirit of the Poland as multicultural, multinational country. At the time when Poland was the most powerful, so 18th century, 17th, 18th century, it was a huge country with huge minorities, Jewish, Lithuanian, Lithuanians considered as partner to this. It was called the Republic of Two Nations. Yes, so it was considered that it's an equal partnership. And minorities of Jewish people, of people who were, we would now say Ukrainians or Belarusians, maybe they would not always define themselves as such, but generally coming from that areas and being part of that society. So people who were Orthodox, some were Roman Catholic, some were of Jewish faith, but some were also of Muslim faith. Yes, we had quite huge Muslim minority springing up from Tatars who became part of Polish army, fighting as early as 1410. They were fighting on Polish side. Yes, so we have, that Gdańsk is one of very few cities in Poland, but also in Europe probably. We have a mosque still. We still have that small Muslim.
Also in Kaunas we have a mosque.
Yeah, so it's not the concept of having multinational society was not alien to us. It was something natural, and we believe that it's in the best of the Polish tradition. And of course, it's the tradition of Polish pre-war Polish Socialist Party, and it's not a tradition of Polish national democracy. Yes, so some people believe that in Poland we still have the traditional problem of the two great personalities of the beginning of the 20th century, Dmowski and Piłsudski, somehow fathers of Polish independence. But to some people, the ideas of Piłsudski are crucial
Yeah,
one.
yeah. We discuss a lot of
Yeah.
Pilsudski ideas, but because we're talking about the history of Gdansk, you started this, mention all these genealogies as well. My question is about, what is opinion about Günter Grass, who wrote so lot about dancing, actually, not about
Oh, but he
Gdansk.
mentioned Gdańsk quite a lot. He mentions the name of Gdańsk, and he mentioned that he immortalized more than a Polish writer. He immortalized the fight of the small group of
Of
Polish post,
posters, your
Polish post,
post.
and Polish post in Gdańsk that was,
I read,
delivering letters. But
Yeah.
they, at the moment of the start of the World War II, in Poland, we mostly talk about Westerplatte, about Polish soldiers who were defending themselves longer than Holland, for instance. Yes, they were defending themselves on a small peninsula, very close to Gdańsk, in fact, part of Gdańsk. So we are talking about them. And Gintergrass immortalized an even smaller group. There was over 100 of the soldiers, but on that post office, there was a group of, I don't know, 20 or 15, yes, who were shooting against all those, attacking them. And with a tragic story that they've burned and killed 9-year-old daughter of one of the postmen. It was a really terrible attack of Nazi Germany on a civil building, yes, and attack in the most cruel. And, they also executed all of those postmen. And only, I think, in the 1990s, finally, Germans admitted that they were not guilty of any crime and that it was a court crime to execute them. Yes, it was very late they were very late to acknowledge it, whereas Gintergrass has written about it, described how brave they were, and so on and so forth. Of course, there was a controversy concerning later, in the late years, the fact that he was a 16-year-old boy, part of really criminal SS formation. But, I really believe...
Jungen.
No, not Hitlerjugend, SS. That's a difference. He admitted to being in Hitlerjugend all along. He didn't admit that he joined voluntarily really terrible formation. And that's, it's difficult to be forgived for, but that's why he kept it so silent for such a long time. In fact, he was showing himself as someone who has the right to critique the Nazi choices of the others, whereas he did such a bad choice. But we have to take into account that he was 16. Yes, we have to take it into account. After all, it's not quite the same as if he was 25 or something like that. But he's a great writer, obviously, and someone who is describing the history of the area. He is writing about it as a place of Kashubian.
I remember.
First of all, yes. He has himself roots, and he has still family living here in Poland and believing themselves to be Polish, whereas he believes himself to be German. I think that, like in any borderland, you always have people who have difficulty actually identifying themselves as nationals. Yes. And it's even in my family, where my father, as a professor of maritime law, he was also a historian of Gdańsk, and he wrote a lot about Gdańsk. And he always reminded that when, after that conference, after World War I, the German and Polish delegation have to meet in order to discuss the future of Gdańsk, those two delegations consisted of people of German-sounding names, and they were representing Poland, whereas people with Polish names were representing Germany. So, it shows, the difficulties in, bringing in those borders.
now that we are mentioning Germany and the German-Polish relationship in the past, what about today, helping Ukraine and moreover, um, understanding, having awareness for responsibility of European geopolitics? It seems like the Baltic states and Poland uh, are now playing the major role in showing the world, together with all the rhetorics of Zelensky, how dangerous is Russia for Europe, and it has been ever since the Soviet Union collapsed, especially ever since Putin came to power. And it seems like Germany is really struggling with its pacifism, is unable to join Poland and the Baltic states equally with equal energy and will to help Ukraine. One of the best examples, probably the Patriot air defense that Germany is willing to give to Poland, but is not allowing Poland to give the Patriot defense system to Ukraine. So how do you see in Poland all that role of Poland and Germany?
The Patriot systems are controlled by the US Army. And in fact, you cannot send them to Ukraine. You cannot do that. And Germany is not in power to do that. By wanting to put them in on Polish soil, but very close to the border, they have offered something that is absolutely reasonable, and the government should accept it, because that's all they could do, because they are also under US and NATO control. So it's not something Germany can do without, there is no decision on the part of US and NATO, then the Patriots can go to Ukraine. It's not for Germans to decide, but they can offer the Patriots to us, and we should accept it and put it as close to Ukraine as possible. Yes.
But Kulaba and Zelensky complained a lot about the delay of tanks and the other weapons. But my question is actually more broad about the geopolitical role. Poland, I think it's much greater.
Germany in the beginning, I think, was very much like the other West European countries. So they actually believed that they will offer Zelensky asylum and that Ukraine would lose the war militarily. And as we see, due to the brave behavior of the Ukrainian army and strong support of the Eastern and Central European nations like Poland, Lithuania, Czech Republic, Slovakia, due to the support of our part, yes, they were not totally abandoned. And finally, I hope that also Germany will join fully the effort, but we have to admit that they have joined the effort in the sense that they also accepted refugees. And in Poland, it was visible throughout the nation, despite all the political quarrels and differences, everybody was for supporting Ukraine as much as possible. And this is probably the only subject on which all the forces within the society are united. Again, you can see solidarity in that support for Ukraine. And well, I would like to remind you that at the time when Poland and Solidarity was getting unanimous support from US, from the United Kingdom, from France, Germany was probably the last country really to think that solidarity is something worth supporting. Yes, so maybe they again need some more time to join in the effort, but we have to acknowledge that as far as the refugee problem, they are also doing their part. And a lot of refugees, after staying some time in Poland, are also transferring to Germany and are receiving a lot of support from them. It's a very difficult moment, because I think it's a great test for the whole European Union, but also for us, for Poland. It's definitely, we never had such a wave, 2 million people in the very first weeks of the war. You know, it's unimaginable.
A lot of that is already portrayed in some of Polish documentary films, or maybe even you in your documentary films have shown such sensitive stories of collaboration, humanitarian help.
There is a film now being produced by the city, but with some funding from the city of Gdańsk about the story on the Belarusian border. Yes, there is a film like that, and there were many films or small reportages done before, but I think one of the major ones is being produced now about Ukraine. There are some films, especially films made by Ukrainians themselves, and sometimes with Polish support, because that's part of the activities of the Polish Filmmakers Society, that from the beginning, like many other creative societies, the filmmaking society have decided to let Ukrainian filmmakers work in Poland and also in Ukraine and support them, so they can speak with their own voice, they can describe it from their own perspective.
Well, thank you very much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you.